Ladies and gentlemen, there are moments in life when words are not needed, when the absence of sound speaks louder than any speech ever could. In our relationships, in our conflicts, and even in the depths of our own souls, silence is not empty, it is revealing. It does not flatter, it does not deceive, and it does not play along with illusions. Silence is the mirror that shows us what lies beneath the surface, exposing truths we spend entire lifetimes trying to escape. Tonight, let us enter that silence and see what it uncovers about the dance between the empath and the narcissist, about the masks we wear, and about the hidden shadows that only quietness can bring to light. Relationships act as mirrors, reflecting back to us not only the qualities we wish to see, but also the ones we would rather deny. Every human connection carries within it a hidden dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious. When two individuals meet, it is not merely two personalities exchanging words and gestures. It is a meeting of inner worlds, a dance of shadows and light, a subtle interplay of desires, fears, wounds, and longings. Each person becomes, knowingly or unknowingly, a mirror in which the other glimpses themselves. The empath, with a heart attuned to the subtleties of others, often finds themselves reflecting back the unmet needs of those around them. They listen, they soothe, they carry burdens unspoken. In doing so, they serve as a mirror for the wounded child in the other, the part that craves acceptance and validation. The narcissist, on the other hand, approaches the mirror differently. They seek it not to see their truth, but to confirm their illusion. They need a reflection that tells them they are grand, flawless, untouchable. And so, when they encounter the empath, they discover a mirror that willingly shines back the light they crave. But a mirror cannot show only the pleasing side of the self. Over time, it reveals the shadows as well. It reflects the neediness behind the arrogance, the insecurity behind the control, the emptiness behind the mask of confidence. The narcissist resists these images. To see them would be to shatter the fragile identity they cling to, and so they demand that the empath reflect only admiration, only affirmation, only light. The empath, often unaware of their own role, complies for a time, offering their energy as though it were infinite. Yet within this dynamic, the mirror becomes distorted. It no longer reflects truth, but illusion. The deeper reality is that every relationship holds within it an invitation to self-knowledge. When we are angry with another, it often signals an unacknowledged anger within ourselves. When we are drawn to another's beauty or brilliance, it often awakens our own dormant potential. What we love or despise in another is rarely about them alone. It is about the parts of ourselves that are hidden in shadow or left unrealized. In this sense, the narcissist does not only take from the empath, but unconsciously reveals to the empath their own lack of boundaries, their own patterns of overgiving, their own difficulty in standing as a sovereign self. The mirror of relationship is not always flattering. It shows us the cracks, the fragility, the projections we cast without knowing. Yet it is in these reflections that growth is possible. To look into another's eyes and see our shadow staring back can be unsettling, even painful. But it is also a rare gift, for what remains unconscious rules our lives in silence, while what is brought into awareness becomes the seed of transformation. When the empath begins to awaken to this truth, the mirror shifts. No longer do they exist solely to reflect the narcissist's grandeur. Instead, they begin to see themselves reflected in the dynamic, the exhaustion, the resentment, the quiet longing to be seen for who they truly are rather than for what they can provide. This recognition is powerful. It reveals that the relationship was never only about the narcissist's hunger, but also about the empath's willingness to deny their own needs. In this moment, the empath is confronted with a choice: to continue serving as a distorted mirror, or to polish the glass and reflect something truer. For the narcissist, the loss of this compliant reflection feels like death. Without the empath's light, their mask cracks, and they are faced with the raw emptiness within. For the empath, however, the breaking of the illusion is the beginning of authenticity. They begin to understand that to see another clearly, one must also see oneself clearly. Every demand, every wound, Every projection in the relationship points back to something within. In this way, relationships strip us of illusions and force us into contact with the parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. The mirror does not lie. It shows us what we are ready or unwilling to see. In the gaze of another, we are offered a reflection of our deepest truths, our secret fears, our hidden strengths. Whether we choose to recognize these images or continue to deny them determines whether we remain trapped in cycles of illusion or awaken to the wholeness that waits within us. The narcissist's mask collapses when the mirror that sustained it no longer cooperates. For so long, they have built an image of themselves, a carefully constructed facade stitched together from fragments of admiration, control, and illusion. This mask becomes their shield against the abyss they fear most, the recognition of their own emptiness. It is polished daily by the attention of others, reinforced by the willingness of empaths and caretakers to validate their grandiose self-image. To the outside world, the mask looks convincing, confident, charming, magnetic, even powerful. But beneath it lies a fragile self, trembling and uncertain, terrified of being seen without disguise. The collapse begins subtly. A withheld compliment, an unmet demand, a silence that stretches too long. The empath, who once poured energy into the narcissist, no longer feeds the facade, and suddenly small cracks appear. The smile that once dazzled now looks strained. The certainty that once commanded obedience begins to falter. The narcissist feels this as a kind of death, for the mask is not merely an image they show to others. It has become their very identity. Without it, they do not know who they are. When the mask falls, panic rises. The narcissist becomes restless, desperate to repair the illusion. They may lash out with anger, accuse the empath of betrayal, or seek a new source of validation to restore the image they cannot maintain alone. Yet every attempt feels hollow, for the collapse of the mask reveals the truth they have worked so hard to conceal, their dependence on others to reflect their worth. The confident posture crumbles into agitation, the superiority into insecurity, the dominance into fear. This collapse is not visible only to the outside world, it is felt most acutely within. The narcissist begins to sense the raw emptiness beneath the mask, the unhealed wounds that have long been covered by performance. What they once projected onto others, weakness, shame, vulnerability, now rises from within, demanding to be seen. The mask which once protected them from these feelings is no longer strong enough to contain them. In its breaking, the narcissist comes face to face with the very shadow they have spent a lifetime avoiding. The collapse is rarely graceful. It often appears chaotic, even violent. Some narcissists will cling more tightly to the remnants of their mask, intensifying control, manipulation, and self-promotion. Others may retreat into despair, unable to reconcile the difference between who they pretended to be and who they truly are. Still, others may shift rapidly between these extremes, desperate to escape the unbearable tension of exposure. To watch the mask collapse is to witness the unraveling of a false identity, one that was built not on truth, but on fear of rejection and the hunger for validation. The empath, standing apart, sees what was hidden. The person who once seemed unshakable now appears vulnerable, even fragile. Yet this revelation is not always met with compassion, for the empath has often carried deep wounds from the very mask that oppressed them. To witness its collapse is both a confirmation of what they sensed all along and a liberation from the illusion that held them captive. The narcissist, without their mask, is revealed as deeply human, but also deeply unprepared to face the humanity they denied. The collapse is also symbolic of a universal truth. No mask can endure forever. Every persona, no matter how convincing, eventually falters when it is not supported by authentic being. The narcissist's collapse is merely a dramatic expression of something that touches every person, the breaking apart of illusions when reality no longer supports them. In this sense, the narcissist becomes a mirror of our own hidden fears, the fear of being seen as we are, the fear of not being enough without performance, the fear that love cannot exist without disguise. When the mask collapses, What emerges is not strength but vulnerability, not power but exposure. It is a revelation of dependency, a stripping away of pretense. The narcissist, who once demanded to be admired, now stands at risk of being pitied. The collapse shows that the fortress was always paper, thin, the crown always borrowed, the performance always fragile. It is in this exposure that the deeper truth of the narcissist is revealed, not a grand figure towering above others, but a wounded soul terrified of its own reflection. Silence exposes truth in ways that words never can. When voices fall away and the performance of everyday life is stripped back, what remains is the raw presence of being. In silence, there is no distraction, no stage upon which illusions can continue their dance. It becomes a mirror that cannot be deceived, a vast stillness that reflects back everything we have tried to avoid. For the narcissist, silence is unbearable, for it starves the mask of its life, blood, attention. For the empath, silence is awakening, for it restores to them the inner voice they have long neglected. When the empath withdraws their energy, the narcissist is left without the familiar sound of affirmation. The absence of praise, the refusal to argue, the lack of emotional reaction, all of these create a void that the narcissist cannot fill. In that void, their performance collapses. Without the echo of applause, the grandeur they cling to feels hollow. Silence holds up a mirror more honest than any words, for it does not affirm, it does not resist, it does not play along. It simply reflects what is. The narcissist looks into that mirror and sees not power, but dependence, not certainty, but fragility. Silence is dangerous to those who rely on illusion because it strips away the noise that sustains the false self. The narcissist thrives on the energy of interaction, even if that interaction is conflict. To be ignored is worse than to be opposed. In opposition, there is still recognition. In silence, there is only the weight of non-existence. The quiet becomes suffocating, forcing the narcissist to face the emptiness they have worked so hard to cover. Without distraction, they are left with the whispers of their own shadow, the unresolved wounds of abandonment, rejection, and shame that gave birth to their mask in the first place. For the empath, silence carries another kind of truth. In the noise of giving, in the endless effort to soothe and heal, they forget themselves. But when they withdraw and allow silence to stretch between them and the narcissist, they begin to hear the deeper voice within. This silence exposes their exhaustion, their pain, their longing to be seen not as a source of supply, but as a whole being in their own right. In that space, the empath begins to understand that their worth does not depend on what they provide to others. Silence becomes the teacher, showing them where they have betrayed their own needs in service of another's illusions. Silence also reveals the nature of the bond itself. Words can disguise, gestures can mislead, but silence speaks plainly. When an empath steps back into stillness, they witness how quickly the narcissist unravels. The truth of the relationship is laid bare. It was never built on mutual recognition, but on one person's need to consume and the other's willingness to be consumed. This truth, once heard in silence, cannot be unheard. It strips away the romance of sacrifice and the glamour of control, showing only a stark exchange of energy where one gives and the other takes. Silence is not merely the absence of sound. It is the presence of reality. In it, the narcissist confronts the loneliness they cannot admit, and the empath confronts the cost of their compassion. It forces both to see themselves without disguise. For the narcissist, silence exposes the cracks in the mask. For the empath, silence exposes the depth of their own endurance and the possibility of reclaiming their voice. It is a crucible burning away pretense, leaving only truth behind. There is also a timeless quality in silence. Without words, there is no script to follow, no manipulation to sustain the performance. The narcissist, stripped of dialogue, loses control of the story. The empath, relieved of constant giving, finds themselves listening to the ancient language of the soul, where truth is not spoken but felt. Silence awakens memory, intuition, and inner sight. It reveals what has always been present but overlooked beneath the clamor of need and noise. Thus, silence stands as the great revealer. It exposes the truth of dependency, the truth of exhaustion, the truth of wounds carried and wounds inflicted. It cannot be argued with, cannot be silenced itself, for silence belongs to no one. It hovers between two souls like an uncompromising witness, showing each what they are without the other's performance. It strips away the illusions of control, revealing the fragile humanity beneath. Silence is not a void to be feared, but a truth to be faced. It strips away the illusions of power and the disguises of performance. It shows the empath their strength and the narcissist their fragility. In silence, we meet not the roles we play, but the essence of who we are. Let us remember that beyond words, beyond masks, and beyond the noise of the world, silence waits, unyielding, honest, and eternal. It is there, in that stillness, that the truth of our being is finally revealed.